While a virus wipes out society and babies are turned into hybrids, a sheltered Gus wonders about life outside the fence. As Dr. Addy Singh heads to work, his wife, Rani, reminds him to buy a turkey. At work, he writes the reminder on a sticky note, then attends to patients experiencing cold symptoms. That evening, Addy realizes that he forgot the turkey, so he promises to get one tomorrow. On that day, Addy finds his patient's pinky shaking as he collects blood samples. Soon, a broadcast declares that the deadliest virus, H5G9, widely known as the Sick, has killed millions worldwide. Addy realizes that life wouldn't be the same again. One day, when he wakes up, he discovers that his wife has a cold and that her pinky trembles. Determined to save her, he hurries Rani to the car despite the curfew. When an officer in a hazmat suit tries to stop him, Addy ignores him. While driving, he sees people fighting with police, homes on fire, and helicopters crashing in the distance. At the hospital, the couple passes through the crowd and reaches the elevator, where Addy comforts his wife. Later, Addy stares at a chocolate vending machine, exhausted. Then, a nurse arrives, looking for a doctor. She leads Addy to the nursery and informs him that something has happened since the outbreak. When he approaches the window, he's stunned to find the newborns with animal fur, ears, tails, and even wings. The experts begin looking for a link between the H5G9 virus and the hybrids, but it's unknown which appeared first. In a national park, Richard Fox and his half-deer hybrid son, Gus, flee from the pandemic known as the Great Crumble. Richard finds an abandoned cabin and renovates it so that they can live there. After settling in, the father creates a book for his son based on memory. Suddenly, the baby calls him Papa, and Richard is happy to hear his first words. On his 4th birthday, the young hybrid, whose ears and antlers are developing, receives the books. His father then takes him to the pond, where Gus hops on rocks. During this, Richard reminds him to duck when he hears a growl, run when he hears a voice, and hide when he sees a human. When Gus leaps onto the last rock, he misses, but Richard reassures him that he'll get it eventually. While they're making maple syrup, they hear the sound of an approaching aircraft. Scared, Gus runs to his father, and Richard covers his son's ears, aware of how loud the noise will be. Leaflets then fall from the aircraft, and Richard sees that it's for the preserve, a safe place for hybrids. Suspicious, he crumples the paper and puts out the fire because it could have given away their location. 3 years later, Gus now has tiny antlers, and Richard gives him a stuffed dog that the young hybrid names Dog. Gus takes Dog into the forest as he reads. His ear then twitches as he hears someone nearby and notices a doe. The animal raises her head and stares at him, and Gus notices they have similar ears. Suddenly, the wind gushes, so the doe flees. Gus also runs as the sky grows gloomy. He hops over the pond rocks but misses the last rock, so he stumbles ashore. As he reaches the cabin, Richard comforts him, saying that Mother Nature is simply washing the world clean. Hearing this, Gus relaxes and enjoys the rain. Later, when the boy inquires about what lies beyond the fence, Richard warns that they can't go out there. Gus then brings up his father's promise to tell him why once he's old enough. That night, Richard tells him about the greedy people ruling the earth and nature eliminating them with sickness. When hybrids appear miraculously, they're feared for being different. In their defense, nature sets the world outside their fence on fire, burning bad people. Richard's duty is to protect Gus from them, and all his son needs to do is live a full life. Gus recalls the doe and thinks the animal is his mother. Richard explains that the doe isn't his mom because his mother is gone. Thinking about their conversation, Richard later examines a picture from a tiny metal box. He then buries the box next to a tree, believing Gus isn't ready to know just yet. At 10 years old, Gus's antlers become larger. His present from Richard this time is a handmade slingshot. Learning how to use it, Gus searches the mud for rocks but finds a hoof print instead. He pursues the tracks, thinking it's his mother's. He arrives at the damaged fence and notices the tracks lead beyond. Nervously, he closes his eyes and steps over the boundary. Feeling brave, he steps further but pauses when he hears a growl. Remembering his lessons, Gus turns to run but bumps into his irate father. Carrying him back inside the boundary, Richard reprimands Gus for going beyond the fence. The young hybrid claims he's just following his mom, and he doesn't trust his father because he still thinks he's too young and won't tell him everything. Richard asserts that Gus's actions show that he's still immature. Hurt by his papa's words, Gus goes home. When Richard arrives, he feels bad and is about to console his sobbing son when he hears someone from a distance. Hearing it as well, Gus stops crying. Reaching the fence, Richard sees a man standing beyond it, so he points a broom at him. Because of the distance, the man misinterprets it as a rifle. The man claims he's looking for his sister, but when Richard advises him to get back on the road, the former tells him it's not safe out there. Meanwhile, a curious Gus arrives discreetly. To distract the intruder, Richard inquires about the sick. The man tells him there's no cure yet and people think the hybrids caused it. Anxious about his son being exposed, the father shouts that he lives alone. However, as Gus's antlers shake the leaves, the stranger vanishes and leaves ribbons on the fence. Knowing what this means, Richard takes Gus to hide in the cubby. His son resists and questions why his father lied about being alone, so Richard explains that lying is okay to protect a loved one. He then assures Gus that he'll return before sunset. Before leaving, the man tells his son that he loves him and acknowledges that the boy isn't little anymore. After a while, Gus hears someone in the house, so he opens the cubby door but only finds the doe. Gus extends his hand to touch the creature and it relishes the connection. However, they hear a scream outside, so Gus closes the cubby and the doe flees. After a while, Gus steps outside to check if his papa has returned. Hearing someone approach, he raises his slingshot. When he sees it's Richard, he runs to him in relief. Richard whispers that they're safe now before collapsing from his injuries, so the young boy carries him inside. That evening, Gus sketches as he watches his father, whose pinky now trembles. In the morning, the young hybrid sees Richard, still unwell, sitting on the floor with the former's drawing of a doe. Richard reveals that his son's mother is a human named Birdie. However, they got separated from her, so Gus promises to look for her together. His father changes the subject and tells his son he's the luckiest father because Gus is a very special boy. He then makes his son promise not to cross the fence. Feeling tired, he asks that his son prepare breakfast. While getting eggs, Gus successfully hops on all rocks in the pond. Eager to tell his father, he rushes to the cabin but finds him dead. Speechless, Gus notices a key in Richard's hand, takes it, and sits down next to the man who raised him. Realizing he's alone now, he grieves. For weeks, Gus fends for himself while his imagination runs wild. He makes friends out of sticks and even dresses a scarecrow in his papa's clothes. Gus also attempts to patch a leak in the pipe, gather supplies, and pull weeds from the garden. However, all these attempts fail. Enraged, he sets the weeds on fire and throws in his stick friends, including Dog. He quickly regrets this and rescues the toy from the flames. Exhausted, Gus lies on the bed and notices a map where Richard drew a small heart. Following it, he digs near the tree's base and finds the metal box. Using his father's key, he opens the box and finds the leaflet and Birdie's photo taken in Colorado. Hoping to find his mother, he prepares for the trip. On his way to the fence, dragging a raft with his belongings, Gus spots a candy bar. After sniffing it, he takes a bite and likes the taste. When he sees another, he scrambles to get it. Suddenly, an arrow darts in his direction, but he dodges it and hides. A poacher searches for him, but another catches Gus from behind. They notice he's older than most hybrids, and when Gus fights back, they learn that he can speak, making him more valuable. Suddenly, a large man named Tommy Jeopard arrives and kills the poachers. The young hybrid runs for his life, but the man follows him into the cabin. The man remarks that Gus's antlers are expensive and that he's never seen a part deer hybrid before. When he drags Gus out of the cubby, Jeopard is stunned to hear the boy angrily yell at him. The boy tries to threaten the man, but it doesn't work. When Jeopard picks up Birdie's photo, Gus tries to snatch it, but the man tells him to take it nicely before handing it back. He then picks up his gun and Gus quickly hides. However, Jeopard only warns him not to create fires during the day since it's what led him and the poachers to him. Before he departs, he repairs the leaky pipe outside and gives Gus tips on gardening, suggesting that he plants beets since he's a sweet tooth. However, when Gus reveals that he wants to look for his mom in Colorado, Jeopard warns him that hybrids like him are being hunted outside, countering Richard's claim that Gus is the only one left. Finally, Jeopard leaves. Despite his warning, the idea of a bigger world inspires the boy, so Gus runs beyond the fence, breaking his promise not to cross it. He soon catches up to Jeopard, whom he calls Big Man, and asks him to take him. Before the Great Crumble, couple therapist Aimee Eden struggled to connect and relate with people in her mundane life. One day, she heard the emergency broadcast about the virus. Seeing everyone panic, Aimee shuts herself in her office out of fear. Weeks later, she gained the motivation to go outside but found the streets deserted. Suddenly, she heard elephants, and as they passed her by, Aimee felt more alive and inspired than ever. She then ran to the abandoned zoo, discovering a bird trapped in a cage. She picked it up and released it into the sky as she found her small paradise. At present, when Jeopard hears Gus following him, he claims that Colorado was blown up by lasers. Knowing it's a joke, Gus continues to follow him. When the boy shares that his father taught him not to litter to avoid being tracked, Jeopard throws trash around for Gus to clean up to divert him. That evening, the man takes medicine for the pain in his leg. Then he hears Gus lurking, so the hunter calls for him to come out, and they have dinner together. However, he tells Gus to leave by morning since he can't take him to Colorado. The next day, Jeopard discovers that Gus has consumed all the food and burned his map. The boy also ate his pills, thinking it was candy. Pissed, Jeopard walks off, but the boy shows him the visitor center on the hill where they can get more food. The big man commands him to go inside while he stands guard outside. As Gus explores the place, he sees a mounted stag's head on the wall. Seeing the antlers, he flees in terror but gets trapped in a net set up by Bev, George, and their son Rusty. Later, the family invites Gus and Jeopard to lunch. Cautious of the virus, the family keeps their masks on. When Jeopard assures them that they don't have the virus, they remove it. Curiously, Rusty tries to touch Gus's antlers. Bev stops him and orders him to go to his room. Before he leaves, she tenderly cleans Rusty's face. Gus observes this and asks if Bev is Rusty's mother, as he's never met one before. He then reveals that he's looking for his mother, and Jeopard informs the couple that Gus's father got sick. Hearing this, Bev feels sorry for Gus. When the hybrid says he's 10 years old, the couple share that Rusty is 11, and he's one of the last who were born completely human. Bev then reluctantly agrees to let him play with Rusty when they learn he doesn't bite. Later, George realizes that Jeopard was a well-known football player. The father notes that his family has survived because no one knows they're here. Hearing this, Jeopard asserts that he'll only stay for the night until the storm passes. Unknown to him, hunters of hybrid children called the Last Men find their tracks in the woods. Gus and Rusty play together, but the latter keeps losing since the hybrid has super hearing. Bev smiles and suggests that Rusty show his records instead. Hearing music for the first time, Gus dances with Rusty. When the men walk in, Bev notices the Last Men symbol tattooed on Jeopard's chest, and she looks concerned. Elsewhere, Addie plays Scrabble with Rani, but they're interrupted when her finger starts quivering. Addie gives her a shot of medicine to suppress the virus but knows it'll return. As they're running low, he decides to get more vials from Gladys Bell, a former colleague who's working on the treatment for H5G9. He rides on horseback to the only medical facility nearby, which is set up in an old family restaurant. While waiting, Addie is wary of the other patients and the military personnel delivering supplies. Upon seeing Addie, Gladys knows he's there for a refill, so she gives him a new set. He reports that each dose lasts 28 days before the sick returns, but Rani's energy is improving. This assures Gladys that she's getting close to the cure. However, she admits to having stage 4 cancer, which she's ignored for years to focus on the cure. Accepting it's not her mission anymore, she urges Addie to continue her research, knowing that he'd do everything for his wife. Despite his reluctance, Gladys hands Addie the file containing her work. When he gets home, Addie is troubled because he knows the procedures to make the cure goes against his beliefs, which is why he quit his profession. When Rani examines the files, she's horrified by what she discovers. That night, a concerned Bev confronts Jeopard about his intentions with Gus, knowing he's the last man. He defends that he joined the group to survive like everyone else, but he's not with them anymore. Bev argues that her family never stole, killed, or kidnapped anyone, but Jeopard asserts that it's because they had others to do it for them. When he suggests that they adopt Gus because it's safer for the young hybrid, Bev considers this. In Rusty's room, Gus recognizes the book his father supposedly made, but his friend makes him realize that Richard didn't create it and that the fires in his father's story don't exist. Ben arrives and returns Dog, which he repaired. The hybrid then watches the mother kiss her son goodnight, making him jealous. When she tucks Gus in, Bev sees Birdie's photo and recognizes the place as Red Rocks. She then turns off the lights and is startled to discover that Gus's eyes glow in the dark. Later, Gus wanders around, unable to sleep. When he sees Jeopard at the door, Gus assumes they're leaving. However, he's disappointed, realizing that the man intends to go alone. Suddenly, Gus hears the last man approaching. He goes to hide while Jeopard prepares to fight but finds that he only has 2 bullets left. Looking around, he sees a bear trap and comes up with a plan. The men announce that they're only after the hybrid child, claiming that under the Abbot's code, they have the right to search the house. Hearing them, the family wakes up and hides. George urges Gus to hide with them, but he's terrified to move. Suddenly, Jeopard kills the hunters outside using the bear trap. However, one of them enters. With his super hearing and slingshot, Gus attacks the hunter. When the latter aims his gun, he pauses, seeing a stag behind the hybrid. Jeopard then appears behind the hunter and kills him. The next day, George asks Jeopard and Gus to leave to protect his family, which the two understand. Rusty gives Gus a jacket and hugs him goodbye. With that, the family sends the two away on a cable car. During the ride, Gus tells his companion that he can search for his mother alone, but the man offers to accompany him to the next town, and they'll part ways there. Gus continues his adventure, unaware that men in animal costumes have spotted them. Meanwhile, Aimee lives happily away from people when a half-pig hybrid baby is abandoned outside her home. Seeing it alone, she welcomes the young hybrid into her life.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.